Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today I want to talk about the different types of machining we do on our CNC machine. That is 2D, 2.5D and 3D. To those of us who have been doing this hobby for a considerable amount of time, there's no real issue as to which is which. But to those who are new to this, it can be quite confusing. On the table behind me, I've got some examples of some work I've done, and we'll have a look at them and see what type they are. Looking here on the table, we start with this one here. This is clearly a 3D model. Likewise, so is this rose and this Grinch. On the other hand, these clock gears here are 2D. As too is this aeroplane. Now this is made up of a whole heap of 2D cut parts. Like this here. Every piece is made just like this here. Clearly this is 2D. This heart-shaped box, on the other hand, is 2.5D. It's cut using very similar principles to the 2D machining, but it's done in different levels. So for pure 2D, basically you just have your shape and it's cut all the way through. For 2.5D, this is made up of different shapes. So you've got the shape of the heart on the outside, then you have a raised area shape of this heart here, and finally we have this bit that's pocketed in here. It doesn't go all the way through, but it's a third part that's built into this one here. So this is made up of 3 2D items basically. The sign here is also 2.5D because it actually has this raised area here that sits on top of the back board here basically. So again, this is another 2.5D item. So let's now have a quick look at this rose here. Now obviously this is a 3D model, but 3D models come in 2 different flavors. We have this sort here. This is the artistic impression of a rose, and it's in 3D. If this was actually a real 3D rendering of a rose, it would be about this deep. In actual fact, if you look at it, you'll see you're actually looking up and under at this rose as well. You're not looking directly into it. So this is the most common type of 3D model that you would produce. And traditionally it would go on a box. It would actually be engraved into the box in a dish shape, or it would be reproduced like this here and inlaid into that box lid or what have you. So remember, most 3D models are artistic impressions of a true 3D object. Now, if you look at the way a 3D object is machined, the cutter would start here and would move backwards and forwards following the contours of the item as it goes, cutting. And it would start at the bottom and work its way up. And that's called raster machining. It goes backwards and forwards like that. A 2D item, like this gear here, is not done in a raster fashion. It follows the tool paths you have. So it would start here and cut this here out, then it would go over here, cut this out, drill a hole in the center, these 2 other holes here, and then would run around the outside, finally cutting the piece out like this. This would be fairly quickly machined, probably in the order of 15 minutes to half an hour. Gears are relatively complex when you start going around them, but it would be relatively quick to do this here. On the other hand, this small rose here, you're looking about 4 5 hours, depending on how quick your machine runs. If you were to try and machine this here in a 3D format, if you drew this up in a 3D fashion and tried to machine it in a raster fashion, you'd be talking quite a few hours to get this here done. And by the time it had finished, it would be a throwaway item. You cannot make something like this here in 3D. It just wouldn't work. In general, mechanical parts like gears and other things are all done in 2D or 2.5D, depending on exactly what they look like, but never in 3D. And the only mechanical part I can think of off the top of my head that is done in 3D would be a propeller. There's not a straight line on a propeller. It'd be a full 3D job. But most of what you guys will be doing will be 2.5 or 2D machining. 3D is usually left for artistic type stuff, as I said before, like adding a model to another project. Well, I hope that's been helpful in explaining the difference between 2, 2.5 and 3D machining. It is critical when you are machining something to pick the right machining strategy for what you're making. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time and end up with something that just isn't going to do the job for you. In the meantime, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch up with you guys later. Cheers!